Welcome to the GovComms podcast, bringing you the latest insights and innovations from experts and thought leaders around the globe in government communication. Now, here is your host, David Pembroke.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to GovComms, the podcast that examines the practice of content communication in government and the public sector. My name's David Pembroke. Today, we look at the do's and don'ts of marketing in the public sector through the lens of tourism. And we'll be having that conversation today with Brent Hill, who's the Executive Director of Marketing at the South Australian Tourism Commission. Brent joined the Commission in November 2015 as a marketing communication specialist, bringing some experience in advertising, branding, digital PR and sponsorship from a career in banking, retail and telecommunications. Brent's been responsible for overseeing a $1.6 billion growth in the tourism visitor economy. He played a key role in launching the new global brand for tourism in South Australia and coordinated 2 global television campaigns and a digital program that now sees southaustralia.com attracting over 6 million visitors annually. Brent's also overseen the successful marketing partnerships / integrations with The Project, MasterChef Australia and Sports Illustrated. In 2018, Brent was recognised as number 21 on the CMO Top 50 list in Australia. And he joins me now. Brent, thanks very much for joining us on GovComms.
Thanks, David. Really excited to be with you.
Those other 20 people on the list must be pretty good if you're 21.
Yeah, look, it's always nice. I think from we work out of Adelaide, and we definitely want people to take notice of what we do. So it's nice to get a bit of that external recognition. But I've got to say, to be honest, it's nice to have that individual recognition. But it is very much a team effort here. So we're pleased with the results that we've had, and we look forward to doing some more.
So when you think about that team, and of course there's, you need the team to be doing the work, but the team needs direction and guidance, and you need a whole lot of things to go well for you to be able to get this recognition. What was it that led to this recognition? What are you doing so well that you have been recognised in such a, esteemed list as the top 50 CMOs?
Yeah, well, I think that the critical thing that the judges sort of really singled out, because we were one of the few, government entities, even though we're a statutory authority, we are still a government entity. And the judges were really impressed, I think, with what we've done from a really commercial standpoint. So we're very focused on ROI. We're very focused on doing activity that we can see genuine return for. And the days of just putting a big grand ad out there and sort of winning all the plaudits and patting ourselves on the back are long gone. It's very much now about, how we can grow our industry, how we can see our operators really benefit. And so from that perspective, I think the things that we've done that have been, up there with all of the large companies in Australia for the success that we've had is, we've got a really good digital program, and we've got a fantastic sort of media creative program as well. So, modern marketing and modern comms demands that you understand and be digital native, but that you don't lose your creativity. And I think those are probably the 2 central things. And probably the last piece that really sort of got us over the line with some of those awards that have come our way is that we've been prepared to take risks. And again, that was pretty unexpected for an organisation like us, but we feel like that's in our DNA.
How is it that you've been able to build the confidence with your minister and with your government to allow you to take risks?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for marketers, it's one of those things you have to communicate regularly, and you buy credits in essence. And we had this discussion with the board yesterday where I was asking them to sign off on a project we're going to do next year, which is pretty out there. And they can now say we've got confidence in what you do because we've been able to demonstrate that ROI. So I think probably the key thing was that, if you go in really clear with a good strategic objective, then people can say, yeah, okay, I can invest in that strategy. So what we tend to do, David, is we don't necessarily actually say we're going to go and get MasterChef, for example. We actually go in and say to the minister, the board, etc., we want to go in a creative way to drive the awareness of Adelaide as a food and wine destination. Do you think that that's a path that you want to endorse? They say yes. We then come back and say the mechanism that we want to do that is MasterChef and working with Gary Megan, for example. So, we're actually asking them to sign off on the objective first and foremost, and then the actual construct, we're free to go off and do that. And then from there, you just have to be really clear about, sharing what that ROI looks like and making sure you deliver. So the expectations on the team are high, but I'm fortunate I've got a high-performing team.
Just for the audience, because we do have people listening all around the world, just if you could perhaps just give us a bit of background about South Australia and the positioning of South Australia as it sits inside the wider tourism story in Australia.
Yeah, sure. So South Australia, we sit right in the centre of the country down in the south. Adelaide is the capital, and like many states around the world, the city of Adelaide holds about 80% of the population of the entire state. So it is very much a story about Adelaide, and so globally, that's how we market. We market Adelaide. So what Adelaide is really known for, first and foremost, is definitely around our wine and our food. So we produce 80% of Australia's premium wine that comes from Adelaide. We have something like 18 wine regions in the state. So naturally, food follows pretty closely when you're talking about wine. So we have, Australia's number one ranked restaurant by Gourmet Traveller. We've got a whole range of chefs here who use all those beautiful, fresh, local ingredients and serve up amazing food. Over and above that, because of our size, Adelaide's about 1.3 million and the state has about 1.7. So it means that the pace of life here is just a little bit more relaxed than your huge cities around the world, which means that, yes, you've got a really vibrant and contemporary city, but you can get out into these beautiful coastal regions, wine regions, etc., in, under an hour. And we're really well known also for our wildlife here. We have a place called Kangaroo Island, which is beautifully well named, and that is something that people come from all over the world to go and see because they want to see wildlife in the wild. So, we've got what we think a lot to offer, and it's a really diverse, big state, but it is something that we obviously need to keep pushing because we are one of the smaller states.
But it's massively competitive, isn't it? Tourism in Australia, that everybody wants the visitors. Every state and territory, every city is looking for the visitors, and really, food, landscape, relaxed lifestyle. That's a fairly common story. How is it that you've been able to differentiate the South Australian story in a way that has resonated? And what are some of the tactics that have really worked for you that have got the visitors to actually take action, which is obviously what you're looking for them to do?
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, it's a competitive place. Australia is a beautiful country. There's a lot of impressive opportunities for tourists around the entire country. So I think the way that we've positioned it, David, is we very much feel like there's a movement around the world where people have gone, look, I probably don't want to be sitting in traffic for half my holiday and, dealing with the ugliness of the big city. And they want to get out of that pretty quickly. And they want to go, I want to experience what it is to be a true Australian and to live like a local. And I had, I'll give you an example of that. I just recently came back from India. Of course, we went to Delhi as a point to get in and out. But Delhi wasn't really our cup of tea. We were pretty quick to get out of there and get into some other areas in Rajasthan and explore what we felt like was a real India. And I feel like that's a little bit about Australia, how it feels for Australia. Is like people come in, yes, they get their big city fix with Sydney and Melbourne, but they pretty quickly want to get out and go, to feel what it's like to live like a local. I want to, experience an Australian way of life. And that's where we come in really well. It's a very easy place to get around. And when you think about holidays, you don't want to be stressed, an hour's journey just to get to the airport, an hour, pushing through crowds to get somewhere, lining up for hours to go and see some sort of man-made spectacle. And so from that perspective, I think that's what's really resonated for us is we've really pushed this authenticity piece, but we do it in a unique way. We understand that Australia is a beautiful place with a lot of amazing stuff. So we don't compare ourselves to anybody else. We just say in Adelaide, you've got a boutique city that's vibrant and contemporary, but it's very accessible. And that's worked really well for us. But, the way that you get that message out, it has to be in ways that challenge. So our Rewards Wonder campaign, for example, we did last September was a good example of that.
All right, take us through that, because I was about to ask, you've articulated the value proposition. How then are you going about telling this story?
Yeah, so with Rewards Wonder, I mean, where we were coming from with that was we felt like, what tourism does really well is that, they typically wait for a beautiful day, optimum day, optimum people, no one on the beach type thing, and go and shoot their ad, and it becomes what we call postcards from paradise, and everybody does that. So our challenge was, let's roll with some cameras for 5 days, so 120 hours, and you can't hide. You can't hide during that 5 days. You got a camera rolling the whole way, and you're just going to pick up everything that happens and stream it. So it was a ballsy idea to prove that sort of authenticity of what you can do and the breadth and depth of what you can do in Adelaide and South Australia. And it was a pretty amazing project, and we were really happy with the outcome.
So in terms of streaming it, what did you have? 5 locked off cameras in different parts of Adelaide that just you switch between them on, what was it, a Facebook Live, or what was the platform?
Almost. So what we actually had was we actually had 3 camera teams. So we'd have these 3 camera teams. They would take over one from each other. So as you can imagine, like Team A would go off and film 8 hours in a row, and then Team B would sort of literally hand the camera, get the camera handed to them from Team A and continue on, and so on and so on and so on, because they were shooting 24 hours a day straight through. And then we ran it on YouTube, and we ran it on Facebook, and we ran it on southaustralia.com, and it was housed on an Amazon platform. Because as you can imagine, I think it was something like 74 terabytes of data. So it wasn't about asking people to watch 120 hours. I mean, we didn't expect anybody to do that. It was more the point that we could do that, and we weren't afraid of what we were going to see. And then we used things like Facebook Live to hold people's interest, to say, well, we're just about to fly into, for example, swimming with the sea lions up on Eyre Peninsula. So if you want to watch this, we think this is a real highlight piece, check this out. Or then we'd say, we're up in the Flinders Ranges and we're flying over Wilpena Pound. You could lob in and watch that on Facebook Live for an hour. So there was a whole bunch, I guess, of highlights. And if you wanted to, you could log into the stream at any point and just watch where we were at that stage and take it all in.
Yeah, wow. How long did that last for?
So the stream ran for 5 days.
Yeah, right.
5 days straight, so around the clock. So there was definitely some times where the guys were just sitting around campfire and so on. So it wasn't enthralling footage for 120 hours. Don't get me wrong, but ironically, we had some people who would actually contact us and say, "I'm actually just watching these guys filming, the night sky and whatever, and it's just fascinating." It was slow TV, if you like. But then we'd speed it up in the morning, and we had guys going surfing, and we followed chefs around restaurants and visited places like the Darrenberg Cube and so on. So there was a lot of highlights all the way through, but it just really emphasised, hey, look, if you're a tourist in South Australia, you can see a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty amazing, diverse place.
Wow, that sounds like a great project. Lots of planning, I imagine, organisation, huge amount of investment, or not so much an investment because you were going, not relying on the traditional, mainstream distribution platforms.
Yeah, and probably because as well, we would literally film it. We'd get the rushes, we'd send them back, and and then pretty much the guys just stitched it all together and put it up. So in that sense, we didn't have that really heavy expenditure on editing.
Yeah.
But logistically, as you can imagine, we had charter planes and helicopters and buses and cars and eco caddies and all that kind of stuff roaring around Adelaide, and as you can imagine, everything was unfolding. So you didn't have any time to really try and prepare stuff. So it was very raw. It was very much like, this is exactly what it feels like to be a tourist cruising around. So, weather variables, you had all sorts of stuff.
South Australia has a very proud history in the content space. The South Australian Film Commission, renowned really as probably the heartbeat, for many years in content production. How important is that heritage, and how important is content in the way that you go about telling your story?
It's one of those things where, it's only going to increase. People really love to consume content, and I think from that perspective, we look at these days. We look at UGC. That's really important, like user generated content, because people are out there with drones, with really amazing capabilities, but also in Adelaide and South Australia, we've got these great creative artistic minds, and so we love tapping into that. The really hard part is, and how do you get it into sort of a bite-sized piece that people can then consume and show enough,
Yeah. So in terms of that, where is your thinking going in terms of your content and in terms of your distribution? How is it evolving? And, what did you learn out of that Rewards Wonder campaign that's shaping some of your thinking for the next, as you described it earlier, the next out there idea that you're looking to put forward?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so one of the things for us was I realised pretty early on when I came into this role that SouthAustralia.com was actually our major resource, really. It was our major asset, because we don't own an airline, we don't own hotel rooms, etc. So we directed everything into that and then peeled out from there to work with either conversion partners, or you could actually convert through the site. And I think from there as well, we really looked at our socials, and a lot of our socials were, I would probably say, photography, focused on really good photography. And so we've just changed that up a little bit because of the fact that tourism is what we're here to do. So we've got to focus on, what's happening this weekend, what accommodation you can stay in. And we just keep telling people, like, this is what you can do, and these are the itineraries, this is where you can stay. Because I think what we're finding with content is, people have limited time. They have a lot of stuff that they could be looking at. So we need to sort of get it into their face pretty quickly and easily and snackable, and then we drive out the itinerary. So from that perspective, we use our socials now similarly to SouthAustralia.com, and I think we were a little bit focused on community. If you can imagine, some of our social team would sort of look at, like, what should we put out there that will drive engagement from our community. But it's less really about that, because I think if you can imagine, like, we're trying to attract tourists to come here to Adelaide. We want to put content out there that people are interested in terms of where they want to stay. But we don't expect that they then have this long-lasting love affair with Adelaide. They move on to their next destination. And I think we were a bit focused on community, which meant that we were perhaps talking to locals a lot. And so we've just adjusted that a little bit to make sure that what we're doing is we're talking to tourists.
Yeah, okay. It's an interesting point. I was about to ask you that building community around a tourism brand, I would have thought is a little bit challenging, because, as you say, people like the experience, enjoy the experience, but as you say, they're moving on to the next thing. Correct.
And I think that's the key. I mean, I think about India, for example. For 2 months before I went to India, I was all over all their socials, looking at all the places I wanted to go. But now, it's not on my radar to go back there for a while. So it's not something I'm looking at. So it's a thing where we look at, we really focus on, we've got a window of when people are interested in looking at us. And then in-trip is very, very important in terms of when they actually are here, and a little bit of a review time afterwards, and then you're out. So So let's focus, rather than trying to keep them on the community and keep liking our posts, etc. We just focus on, this is what to do when you're here.
Yeah. Now, in terms of your use of data to understand, the potential visitors, can you describe or explain to us just exactly how you go about building the personas, understanding the audience, and using that data to make sure that your content's right and your distribution strategy's right?
Yeah. So, look, data's critical for us. Again, it's our major asset. And so underneath southaustralia.com, we have a full Adobe Marketing Cloud tech stack. And so we build up an audience through there. So everything we do with our partners, so, Rewards Wonder, for example, people say, well, how many people saw the video or whatever? And you can point to 14 million people saw it at some point. But the really exciting piece is actually what we got out of that was a 5 million strong database that we could then plug into southaustralia.com, that we then knew, okay, they're interested in South Australia. We can serve them personalised content and stuff that they're interested in, and that's really powerful. When people are looking at something that they're interested in, they're much more inclined to engage. And we're really good at going, if you're not interested in us, we back off as well. So that data side, I know some people think it's creepy. Some people think it follows you around, etc. But it's one of those things where if you're getting targeted with things that you are interested in, or you would potentially be interested in, you're much more inclined to be comfortable with that. I think it's when marketing just sort of does the spray and pray approach, just throw stuff out there and hope for the best. That's when people get annoyed.
And it sounds to me also, you talk about using the linkages out to your partners around conversions to understand the business impacts of the work that you're doing. How is it that you're then able to gather that information to be able to, roll up the impact in terms of dollars and cents that you've been able to, generate, and jobs that you've been able to generate?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's, that's the number one question for any marketer, really, isn't it? It's about that sort of ROI piece, and how do I know that the money I'm spending is actually working? And so for us, we've just keep building out our metrics. We've got about 14 metrics that we use now. And I'll give you an example of one of those. We've done some data sharing agreements, and so we have a thing that we call marketing touch rate. And so what that is we work with some of our operators who we've got data sharing arrangements with, and we can actually see the data of somebody who interacts with southaustralia.com and our content, and then interacts with their site, and hopefully that's with the booking page. And in some cases, we can actually see right through to that thank you booking page and know how much they've actually purchased. So from that perspective, that's great for us in terms of we can say, okay, well, over the last fortnight, this is how many people have been on southaustralia.com and then wound up on a tourism operator's page and ended up booking. So we work with a lot of operators on that. And, some of these guys have got minuscule, if any, marketing budgets. So they're really appreciative of the fact that us, with our bigger budget, are driving really tangible results for them. They can see, they only have to look at their back end. They can see that southaustralia.com is, one of their top referrers of business, and they can see the value that we're providing.
Do you think you've got a good handle on that? Like you said that you've got data sharing arrangements with some, but how many more would you possibly need to be able to get that, the real fidelity into that picture?
Yeah. Look, I think David, I think we've got enough now that we feel really comfortable about our numbers. Statistically, it's really relevant in terms of the number that we've got. What we can do as well is we can always report to any operator and say, well, this is how many leads have been generated from the site that have gone to your website. We do that for everybody. So there's 18,000 businesses. And they all get leads, but it's, as I say, it's those ones that we've got a data sharing agreement where we can measure all the way through to the actual revenue component. So we feel we've got a really good handle on that, and that is something that makes us stand out from the crowd. I feel like it's something we've worked really hard on over the last 3 years, invested a lot of money and time in, and it's put us into a really good position where we can, I guess, exploit that that advantage that we have of a really strong digital data system.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure quite a few people are listening and thinking, well, it's all great for Brent. He gets to, market South Australia and the food and the wine and, the sexy end of sort of government and public sector communication.
Yeah.
They might be sitting there communicating regulations around wastewater or something like that. What advice, though, and obviously accepting that there is a difference and there's a different profile and there's a different risk appetite and there's a whole series of differences and nuances across government and public sector content. But what are some of the essential truths for you that sit at the heart of really good, effective government public sector communication?
Yeah, look, I think it's I think everybody could benefit from a bit of that, I guess, personalisation and using their data more effectively. And I know that there are some things that you would call sort of a grudge purchase or just a public service announcement, I guess, if you like. But you often, from a government perspective, you want to make sure that gets to the right people. So it gets to a homeowner, or it gets to a child going to school, for example. So I think that's the thing. The days of that sort of spray and pray kind of approach, I think, are gone, and that's where people get frustrated, I think, because just pushing a message out, like they a lot of these messages government are trying to get out are really important ones, and so I think that's where that personalisation of data going. This is, for example, like myself. It's pretty obvious if you looked at a lot of my different profiles that you'd realise, hey, I'm really into things like environment and recycling and so on. So if the government is trying to send messages about what they're doing around that, then I'm going to be really engaged with that. So from that perspective, like serving those ads in the spaces where I'm reading about it at the right time, I'm going to really engage. And at the end of the day, that's what government wants to do. Government wants to engage with its citizens and get its message across. So, it's we do work a little bit collegiately with our government partners here in South Australia, and there is an understanding around that just putting a newspaper ad out is probably not enough anymore, and maybe use of things like data and digital and social are getting more and more currency, because it means that the people that you're really trying to get your message through are getting it.
And what advice would you then have for people who are looking to build that capability within their team? What are some of the steps that they need to take?
Yeah, well, you've got to be prepared to invest in it. That's one of the key things, and it's not a short-term game. So you need to be able to sort of say, I'm going to put away some money to go and get something like a data management platform. And you need people who understand that for you and understand how it works and can really interrogate it. So you need to put some people in who are digital native. And look, I don't think everybody within government needs to have their DSPs and really go down that full path. You can get agencies to do that for you. But I think you just got to be prepared the fact that it can be a bit of a longer term game. But you've got to be prepared to invest to do that.
But the thing is, though, in government and public sector, there are huge numbers of data sets available that people can draw on to get the insights, aren't there?
I mean, it's incredible, really. Like government probably has as good a data sets as anybody out there, bar maybe the banks. It definitely is all about, we focus, we have a view that, it can be about sort of 20% strategy, 80% execution. And I think sometimes within government, it's around the other way. You see people spend all their time working through strategy and getting all these data and insights, but then very, very poor on the execution. And I think that's the thing as well. I think you've got to be, we have an expression, good enough to go. Sometimes you've got to be brave enough to say, okay, it's not absolutely perfect, but we've got to get this in the market and make a difference. So that's the other thing I would say, because within government, there's endless amounts of data. It's about sometimes just going, okay, I've got the message, I've got the objectives, let's go, let's get into market.
And in terms of that investment, how big an investment, or is there any guidance that you can give to people as to what might be the first couple of things that they would invest in?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's it's interesting because it could be like for us, obviously, it gets into the millions because of the Adobe Ad Cloud that we put in. That tech is not necessarily cheap and it's pretty in depth, but once it's running, it's incredible what you can do, and your costs, year after year, your costs reduce from that initial, investment. But I would say also there are agencies who can do it for you initially if you haven't got those bigger budgets. And there's agencies who can tap into that data and get the message out for you and use personalized data that you can then connect with your content. So I would say that's the first thing to get the stakeholders to agree to sign off and say, yeah, okay, we'll give you the extra money to go and build it in-house, but you probably need to get some results on the board first with perhaps an agency.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Brent, well, thank you so much for your time today. That's a great story, and congratulations on all of your success. I know that you will be in Canberra in and around later in April, early May, I think, speaking at a public sector strategic communications and engagement conference. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm looking forward to that. I think, it's one of those things. I love sharing what we do, and I love hearing from other people because it's a continuous improvement thing. So, yeah, it's called the Public Sector Strategic Communication and Engagement Conference. Okay. That's end of April, early May. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it'll be great.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, mate. Thank you very much for your time. And to you, the audience, thank you once again for coming back to discuss today. I think some insights there from the wonderful place, which is South Australia. I was there only a couple of months ago, and I can vouch for everything that Brent says. It really is a unique, authentic, genuine, just a wonderful place to have a great holiday. And it is a little bit slower than the big cities, but that's most of the appeal. So anyway, thanks to you for coming back once again. Thanks very much to Brent Hill, who's the Executive Director of Marketing at the South Australian Tourism Commission, for our conversation today. And I will be back at the same time in 2 weeks' time. But for the moment, it's bye for now.
You've been listening to the GovComms podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes.